Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to talk about a question I got on a recent LinkedIn post at the time of this recording. So therefore, all the thoughts are my own and not based on any of the associations that I'm with. The question really struck me because I feel like I need a long video to answer this question. I was able to provide a sufficient reply for the comment, but I think I need to elaborate. And the question is, how do you build trust in the oil and gas community? Before we get to the content, please be sure to like this video, subscribe so you can get more content in oil and gas and professional development topics, and please be sure to comment on the video below so I can incorporate your feedback into future videos. Please be sure to hit that notification bell when you do subscribe, because I upload whenever I want. Well, let's get to the content. Before I talk about how to develop trust in the oil and gas industry specifically, I think we need to talk about what is trust comprised of. So for those of you who read a lot about emotional intelligence, EQ, and whatnot, you're probably knowing what I'm going to bring next. Or if you're an engineer, you're going to appreciate this too. I'm going to define trust based on an equation, right? The trust equation is based on 4 facets, 3 that are directly correlative to each other, and 1 that is inversely related to the overall trust. Trust equation is credibility, reliability, and intimacy, all over, self-orientation. Credibility. Credibility means that the person's pedigree, the technical authority, how much experience does that person have? Is this person legit? In other words, in the Shillennial words or the Gen Z words. So is this person not educated or formally educated, 50 years of field experience, a lot of experience in academia, done consulting? Has this person been in the game for a while? That's how I see credibility. Now the next one is reliability. Reliability is, okay, well, this person is legit, but how consistent is that person in their output and results or outcomes? How much are they biased towards action and they stick to those actions? When they make a commitment, are they sticking to those commitments? Do they produce those commitments? That's how I see as reliability. Intimacy is where I see a lot of engineers and people that are in STEM orientations or even introverts that have the biggest trouble. Intimacy means, how old do you know that person? You know, were you friends since preschool? Were you college roommates and partied? Were you in the same fraternity and sorority? Were you in the same professional society? Have you worked with that person? Do you know details about that person? That's the intimacy. Now, the question you may have is that denominator, self-orientation. What exactly does self-orientation mean? Well, to elaborate, self-orientation means how much is that person that's perceiving you relating to his or her goals. So let's put it this way. You have a PhD in petroleum engineering. You have gotten multiple publications. You live up to your commitments in professional societies. And your inner circle, for example, knows you really well because they have seen your work since you were a student before getting the PhD, or you've gotten the bachelor's, master's, and PhD, and you have that advisor as a professor, then as an actual advisor throughout your master's and PhD. Therefore, the advisor who perceives you in that numerator is going to trust you a lot. The self-orientation is how is that person related to his or her goals. So in other words, the self-orientation for that particular advisor, like if I were to promote this PhD to a professor tenure, how would that look like? Well, that advisor would be, well, I've collaborated with this person multiple times, has the PhD, sticks to his commitments on the publications, and have known him since he was a bachelor in university. I also know that this person is not a selfish person and is doing everything for self-promotion. I know this person is willing to collaborate with me. I know this person cares, has an altruistic bent. That's where the self-orientation is. How much is that related to that person's goals? If there's a PhD who has a lot in the numerator, but the denominator is he's meant for self-promotion, he's all about his personal goals rather than other people's goals, then that trust is neutralized or even decreased from the academic advisor. But if the academic advisor knows that this person or this PhD that he's perceiving has goals to give back to society or to the industry, then the trust equation is a lot higher. So that's a long example, jumbled up example of what a trust looks like in the trust equation framework. Now, with all that being said, how do we develop trust in the oil and gas industry? Well, let me start with credibility again. You develop trust in the oil and gas industry based on the experiences that you have by marketing those experiences, and also by investing in yourself, investing in your education. Examples I have done to develop trust in the oil and gas industry, well, from one internship to another, I was able to get a good GPA in school, to get my first internship, or to get several interviews. I was able to articulate what I want out of an internship. And then after the first internship, I was able to get the next internship because of my experiences in the previous internship. And then the third internship, I was able to get that one because of my experiences in the second internship. And then one leads to another, and now I have 15 years of oil and gas experience, including my internship experience. So that's where credibility comes from. Now there's reliability. That is the one where if you are a little bit ADHD, you're gonna have some fun with this one. One thing I've learned in terms of reliability is that I have been consistent in obtaining education and giving back. So for example, the reliability is I'm able to deliver at work on deliverables, on objectives, and I'm able to be consistent in that as well. I show up every single day, and I also show up as a digital presence to make sure I'm maintaining my brand. So I do that inside and outside of work. In professional societies, you say that you are going to pull an event off, like pull off an event, and then you do it. So that is a reliability component in a professional society. And if you say that you are going to complete something, like for me, I'm going to complete the MBA. I'm going to turn in my assignments. That's how I was able to earn trust with my group. That's how I was able to earn trust with my advisor in my master's program. And even I was able to get trust with my professors when, as a bachelor, in competing in the student paper contest at Impetrable. I was providing consistent results and answering questions really quickly and incorporating feedback into my presentations for the student paper contest. So that's where reliability comes from. Now there's intimacy. This was the one that I have struggled with the most when it comes to my network and when it comes to even perceiving the importance of it. So for example, I was all about business. I even had a reputation at some of the companies I worked for that, she's all about business, she's not into small talk. And that piece of feedback in passing struck me because I realized that there could be a lack of trust with my coworkers because people don't know me. They don't know personal details about me. They don't know that I love cats. They don't know that I have other hobbies. They didn't know that I was exploring fitness. They didn't know that I got married at a pump jack. So I make an effort to provide some personal details, some things that make me a little bit more fun, rather than just what makes me look good on paper and a resume. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that I was over-indexing on credibility and reliability that I didn't think too much about intimacy. So I was scared to let people into my life. Then I met my husband and everything was great, but I'll save that for a different story on how I was able to build relationships. Now, all I do is I love building relationships and love growing businesses and love the thought of connecting people with each other in the industry and realizing I have a knack for it. Now, the bottom part is tricky because there is always going to be a perception. And the reason why I say it's tricky because when you think of intimacy and then when you think of self-orientation, they can kind of relate to each other too. So for example, if a person doesn't know you that well, then they might be thinking, oh, this person only cares about their own goals. So in terms of self-orientation, that person is more selfish than altruistic. So the trust goes down. But the more you know that person, the more intimate you are with a particular person who perceives you. And if that person knows that you are bent altruistically or you want to give back to the community or your intentions are good, then trust equation goes up. I like to relate the intimacy and self-orientation with each other because that was something that I have struggled with throughout my career. To be transparent, as if I wasn't transparent in this entire video. Now, there's also credibility and self-orientation as well. So for example, why'd you get all those degrees? Did you get all those degrees from academic institutions because you wanted to advance yourself and leave everyone behind. That's also where self-orientation becomes a little bit tricky. Then there's reliability. Is that person only being reliable because to advance or to get that as a means to an end? So I personally think that intimacy and self-orientation are strongly correlated with each other as opposed to the other two, because at least that has been my personal experience. If you have other experiences relating to credibility and reliability, go ahead and comment below. I'll also put the trust equation below where I found it and, well, as far as public sources of where I found it, and we can definitely continue the conversation from there. But I have explained so much about the trust equation and how I was able to apply it to my life. Now let me provide some advice and some examples of what I have seen in terms of the trust equation and how certain careers have embodied the different kinds of trust. So let me be clear on that, or let me expand on that a little bit. Credibility. You have people publishing over a bajillion technical papers. They're tenure-track professors, and they come from the best university for petroleum engineering, according to the U.S. News World Rankings, for example. And then in terms of reliability, person always meets research objectives, and if they're making a commitment to something, they achieve it. Intimacy. The person has a really good relationship with all the students that they've academically advised or chaired on their committees for their masters and PhDs. Those are examples I would give are where a professor can mostly index on their credibility and reliability and less about the intimacy. I don't know why there are balloons showing these videos. I wonder if this is going to show up in the recording. So I've seen technical authorities such as professors do really well on the credibility and the reliability space, not so much on the intimacy space. Now, I think it also depends on the company culture as to where you would over-index. If you have a really technical company that relies a lot on the pedigree, then credibility is up there. And yes, when you are working for an enterprise, the reliability is huge. And then depending on the corporate culture, intimacy can be high or intimacy can be low. It really depends on how open and transparent that corporate culture is. So if you work in the industry, if you work for a business, I would say that you have a lot of the credibility and reliability and less on the intimacy. Now, where I see a lot of people do well on the intimacy component in the oil and gas industry are people that work in sales, people-facing roles. So the client successes roles. So if you work in business development or you work in sales, there's a high intimacy component that's required. And for people that are really good at sales and get the deals done, they're really good at building relationships and nurturing those relationships. I'm not saying that if you work for an enterprise or if you work in academia, it is advised to over-index on one or the other. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is that the types of careers that I have noticed encourage you to over-index on certain things because that is the trend. But at the end of the day, it is a balance, it is about awareness, and it's about playing to your strengths. So now let me talk about how you can play to those strengths. If you're somebody who likes to be that technical authority, I would challenge you to develop an inner circle of people that you have worked closely with and who can vouch for you to up that intimacy and increase trust for more people. Building relationships is very important in the industry in the sense that in the event anything happens, whether if you get a promotion, a demotion, or getting laid off, and I'm being transparent here, again, as if I wasn't being transparent at the beginning of this content, building those relationships is going to be key. Sometimes it is dependent on the relationship, whether if that person is going to help you or not. And if you up the intimacy factor, that is probably the biggest piece of advice I can give to a lot of classic engineers or classic people that have technical backgrounds in the oil and gas industry. Build stronger relationships. Now, reliability. Reliability is tough because there is an intersection of being a young professional and not knowing emotional intelligence or how things work in the industry, like getting it, versus a seasoned professional. There's reliability based on how well you live up to your commitments, because there are things that you can't control and things that you can't control. So the way you build reliability is prioritizing, knowing what your values are, in communicating. If you say you cannot make a commitment that you said that you were going to before, give a notice, give some explanation, develop that documentation. CYA. So that is my piece of advice on reliability. Now, when I say about young professionals and little experience, keep getting those reps and those numbers of experience. Keep asking for those projects, but complete those projects too. It's very easy to sign up for a professional society as a resume booster, only to not live up to your commitments or live up to how much contribution you're going to make in that professional society. Stick to your word. Be a man and be a woman of your word. Be a man of your word, be a woman of your word. Intimacy, I would challenge you to also have some substance with you. Now, if you're all about relationships and relying on playing golf or bringing donuts for a group of people, again, my advice is to incorporate some of that technical authority or a technical conversation and talk shop for a little bit. If you're over-indexed on relationships, I would strongly suggest to add some technical substance into the conversation or to be helpful in hard skill. If you're over-indexed on reliability, that's very interesting actually, because if you're over-indexed on being consistent, then you're predictable, and then our people are going to be surprised if you keep moving upward. So as long as you're reliable in upskilling yourself, that's where I would suggest you can improve on. And then reliable on building those relationships is a way. So being over-indexed on reliability could be a really good thing. You're in luck. But if you're over-indexed on credibility, up your relationships. And then if you're over-indexed on relationships, up your credibility. Self-orientation, again, is going to be tricky because, again, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I think you need to make yourself clear by always talking about what the intent of a conversation is going to be, what the intent of a relationship is going to be, what the intent of a communication is going to be. That way people will get a better understanding whether if you're being selfish or whether if you're being altruistic. And I'm using those two words right now as just two separate examples or distinct examples, but you can use any word choice that you can to represent opposites. I think I've said quite a bit in this particular video regarding trust. I've spent many years trying to develop trust, and trust me, it ebbs and flows when it comes to the trust equation. When you're a young professional, you may not have that credibility or you may not have the intimacy. So then you got to up the reliability. When you're a seasoned professional, you got the credibility and you got the reliability. But maybe you don't have as much intimacy for a lot of people because you have more context in your own generation or your own level of seasoned professionals. And then finally, if you are a mid-career professional, you may have the best of everything. You might be the jack of everything, but not the master of everything. So my suggestion for you is, as you come to a crossroads, what are you going to index on? And again, I'm not suggesting to index. I think it just ebbs and flows. The other thing I'm going to mention is, as you develop in your careers, you may want to ask the question, who do you want to trust you on? Do you want to stretch yourself thin on trying to be that technical authority and limiting the intimacy? Or would you rather have a small circle of people that you have the credibility, reliability, and intimacy, as well as the self-orientation squared away, to where you have that strong inner circle who really believe in what you can do and what your potential is? To what extent are you going to care about what people think too? Those are questions I'm going to leave you with. And I believe I have given my soapbox on trust in terms of the equation. As usual, please be sure to like this video, subscribe so you can get more content in oil and gas and professional development topics. And please be sure to comment on the video below so I can incorporate your feedback into future videos. This is Yoga Shri Pradhan, or Yoshi Pradhan, and I'm signing off.